Kind of nice how everybody came to order all on your own. Thank you. All right, if we could stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. We are just missing Nano. Can I get an approval of the agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. And we are right to communications. So we have a different agenda set up this time, as you all may have seen, where people who come to visit us and spend their time with us don't have to sit through all of the exciting budget development and all of that. So starting off with recognition, our Mehlville Oakville United Prop S campaign committee leadership team is here. And I've got something I'd like to say first before we get to the recognition side, which is the Prop S ballot initiative was a resounding success, over 80% voter approval. When done the right way, school ballot campaigns are about furthering culture between a community and its schools. They focus on a real need and communicate a solution. They speak truth and they build trust. The women of the Mehlville Oakville United Committee are shining examples of these ideals. Through their work, Prop S is not just a successful ballot initiative, it is an important step in the continued advancement of our district. On behalf of our board and administration, we thank you for your tireless efforts and congratulate you on this amazing achievement. Thank you. So we have, as I said, our leadership team here tonight with us. Unfortunately, COVID restrictions kept us from having everybody who was on the MOU team that contributed to this amazing victory. So we have some appreciation items for you here, and we will make sure that the other people on the team also get the certificates that we have made for them. All right, so I'm gonna go through the leadership team. Abby Reese. Rebecca Bahora. Laura Metz. Jennifer Rayborn. Stephanie Bailey. Last but not least, the treasurer, Nikki McRae. Thank you, all of you. Oh yeah, we can.
Well, take the flowers, put them in there.
Okay, next up is open period for patron comments. And we did not have anybody sign up for the opening. And then standing committee reports.
They were doing those at the end.
Sorry. We will return to that. Governance. So considering bids for asphalt seal and striping.
Good evening. I solicited bids for asphalt seal and stripe for 7 of our locations, including some asphalt repairs as well. And I'd like to move forward with, move to approve the lowest qualified bid submitted by Royal Construction and Pavement for the amount of $234,203, which includes professional and contingency fees. Any questions?
Questions or comments? No questions? Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, considering the messenger bid.
We received 3 bids for the Mehlville Messenger this year. I am recommending that we go with Stevens Publishing for the Messenger. That's a change from our publishing company for several years. Their bid was slightly higher than the Missourian, but we've had some concerns about print quality with the Missourian. They're not quite aligning their color plates, and that's creating some blurry print, which is hard to read at times. So that's why I'd like to recommend Stevens Publishing Company for the 21-22 school year for printing the Mehlville Messenger. Happy to answer any questions on that.
I appreciate your examples you sent yesterday so that we could see what you were talking about and why we were going with a little tiny bit higher bid, just barely, but still was worth asking. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Did the Missourian give any explanation of why their quality was substandard?
We had brought it to their attention after the December issue, and they kind of validated that they saw the same issues we saw and thought that they could resolve that problem with the next issue. I didn't see measurable improvement with the next issue. So
Sounds like they should have caught that before it went out the door.
typically that's part of the quality assurance process when checking front runs.
Yeah, that's certainly a reason to kick them to the curb. I mean, if they can't catch their QC out before it goes out the door, then that means they're not doing their proper maintenance on their equipment or anything like that. So obviously that's a significant reason to find another vendor. So it's good that we can find one with the same expense that we're having, and theoretically someone is going to keep their quality up to where we need it.
What is the bid increasing by?
I believe it's around $20 an issue
Thank you.
in that spreadsheet.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Yeah. Okay.
I move to approve Stevens Publishing Company in the amount of $19,543.20 for the printing and mail handling of issues of Mehlville Messenger for the 2021-2022 school year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Jessica. Budget development. Marshall.
All right. This is pretty important tonight. I think one of the most important things is this process for the board members to gain a very good understanding of what makes up our preliminary budget and just the key items. I'm going to hit the highlights tonight, but the highlights are not quick and simple. So I'm going to go through this, and at any point in time, stop me have questions. It's very important that you understand the key items tonight. I passed out a hard copy. There's many reasons why tonight we need a hard copy versus just online. So hopefully everybody has that. It gives you a chance to tear that apart and compare 2 or 3 pages. Since you don't have 2 or 3 monitors that you can look at, you really need to cross-reference this stuff. So with that, we'll dive in and try to go through this as efficiently as we can. All right, so on the first page of the budget overview, first thing we want to look at is the operating fund and the gain and loss for the fiscal year 21 forecast and the fiscal year 22 budget. First thing you're going to see on the forecast number is a loss of $1,965,000. We need to look at the normalized loss, not that loss. There's 2 one-time type transactions that skew that number. We need to subtract out the $1.5 million CARES revenue that was unencumbered that we're not going to get next year. We will get ESSER money, but it's not unencumbered. So we need to back this money out, and we need to add in $2.9 million of transfers that we're making this year from our general fund to the capital fund for some unique capital projects, one-time capital projects. So if we do that, if we back those 2 transactions out, your true operating loss this year for the forecast is really $565,000. You won't see that anywhere, so you might want to write that down. $565,000 loss. That compares with the preliminary budget of $1,515,000 loss. So really, instead of the difference being $450,000, the true difference is really $950,000 larger loss. So let's tear into this to see how we went from $565,000 loss to $1.5 million. So I'm going to send you now to the next page on the revenue side, and we'll look at, the top part. And we're going to see on the top part where you see fiscal year 22 budget, the total of $124 million, and you're going to see the change is a negative 21%, and the dollar amount is a decrease of $32 million. Those are skewed numbers. Those have one-time extraordinary items. So you need to look at what is really normal. In this year, fiscal year 21, in the fiscal year 21 column that shows $156 million, that includes the bond proceeds that we recently passed of $38 million. We should receive that $38 million on June 3rd, approximately. So that counts as revenue. Well, that's not comparable revenue. So you have to back that out if you want apples to apples. When you back that out, the true revenue increase is really $6.3 million, or 5.3%, which you're not going to see on that schedule.
Okay.
So the true increase is $6.3 million, 5.3%, when you exclude the bond proceeds. Of that $6.3 million, you've got $3.1 million that is really going to non-operating funds for things like food service mostly, and some student activity funds. And then you also have $3.2 million hitting in operating funds. The $3.2 million increase in the operating funds is a combination of $4.2 million of additional local tax revenue, $1 million of additional formula revenue, offset by a reduction of $1.8 million CARES revenue, and the $600,000 reduction of VIC money. So those four main items make up your $3.2 million increase to operating funds. And that's shown on note 1 of that revenue page. When you dive a little deeper and you go to note 2 to look at the local tax and see sort of what makes up that $4.2 million increase, you're going to read that it's really made up a lot of one-time unique events. There's 3 items that really contribute to that local tax increase. You have a $1.2 million increase in revenue just because we're getting back to a normal collection percentage. Tax bills go out, but it only matters what you collect. We had a lower collection in the COVID year, and now we're estimating that we're going to have a more normal collection this coming year. That increased collection percentage, going from 95% to 97%, that gives a bump of $1.2 million. We won't have a bump the year after that. It's, you know, if you go along at the normal percentage every year, there's no bump. We also have a $2.2 million spike from personal property. The personal property valuation in March came in at a 19% increase. So that's just never happened. And the reason for that is attributed to, in the COVID year, everybody going out and buying either boats or RVs or campers. So there was a tremendous spike in those kind of purchases. And we see now that in the 19% increase number. So that's a huge spike. It's not limited to CPI inflation. It comes through this year. And what happens on your personal property tax bills each year, if you keep the car year after year, your bill goes down. So there's going to be depreciation on this huge spike, which will help to offset future years of personal property tax. So that's going to be a future impact to think about. The only normal increase we had was $800,000 just from the normal real estate levy and the increase in valuation there that was limited to the 1.4% inflation. Overall, we had $4.2 million increase of local tax revenue. And then if you dive down to note 4, you'll see that we had a $1 million increase in the formula, and that's pretty much entirely due to a unique spike in the summer school ADA. So that's really a non-repetitive thing as well. We're estimating 240 ADA. The year before, we had 95. That difference generates the $1 million. In the future, we don't really anticipate another spike from the 240, so it's really somewhat a one-time spike. We're having 2 sessions of summer school this year. The highest ADA we've had in the last decade is 171, and that was off of 1 session. But the whole point is, it's nice to get the boost, but in future years, you won't get that boost. The other thing that's not on these notes, so we had $3.2 million increase to the operating funds for the revenue. The one thing that's not in these notes is an additional $1 million hitting into the operating funds that really comes from the COP levy reallocation, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So the true additional amount coming into operating fund revenue is really about $4.2 million for this year.
Hey, Marshall, can I ask a question really quick?
Sure.
Going back to the summer school thing that you had mentioned about that we won't get that bump again, like we're offering to. Can you explain that
It's
one
just
more
the
time to me
calculation.
about why next year if we repeated that same type of formula for summer school, why would that not look the same?
Well, your calculation on formula is based on overall, really WADA. And part of that calculation looks at your current year summer school. So any fluctuations from year to year in summer school affect whether you go up or down.
Got it.
So if you have 240 every single year, you don't have a fluctuation from that variable.
Got it.
But if you have more or less, then that variable will contribute to a change in the calculation.
Okay.
It won't affect I mean, it's part of the overall calculation. So there could be other factors too, but that variable would be the same.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
So the ADA of the summer session is increasing because so many students are trying to recover credits, so that's why they're offering 2 summer sessions this year, and that's what's increasing it overall, and that's why.
Well, all I know is the estimate of 240. I'm going to let Brian handle that.
All right, so the reason for the double session this year, in part, is to be able to, technical difficulties. The reason why we're doing a double session, in part, is to address the learning loss mitigation. We're using the summer, June, and July to really try to address what happened in March and May of last year, and also in part to be able, there we go, and also in part to be able to help address issues at the high school level, issues at the middle school level, and issues at the elementary level. You figure from a virtual education standpoint that students were exposed to, teachers across the board have said we weren't able to make it through the kind of curriculum that we expected to be able to make it through. So we're using this summer as an opportunity to provide students across the district a chance to be able to review standards. It's not as much enrichment this particular year at the elementary and middle, and then high school is pretty standard. We're just doubling the sessions to give kids every opportunity to be able to kind of get back to a place where they expected to be.
Thank you.
And I would add that this 240 is, at this point, start out as a medium risk type estimate. I'd say now it's on the upper side, and not conservative, but on the upper side. And we can hit 240, but it could also be a little bit below that. We're still sorting that out and see where that lands. I think that's important. If it's below 240, the revenue comes down a little bit. So now let's go to the expense page. It should be the 3rd page in your packet. And just walk through what those are looking like. You'll see at the top that the expenses are going up about $3.4 million, 2.7%. You'll see that the budget really assumes, you look at note 6 down there at the bottom of the expense schedule. Note 6 talks about we're assuming there's 174 days of being in school next year. And that drives up certain expenses just because you're there every day compared to this year where we were not there every day. So things like bus, gasoline, SROs, all of those types of expenses are going to be higher next year. So when you're looking at the total expenses or looking at little, individual line items, you've got to factor that in because there's some expenses that increase quite a bit because of that factor alone. So let's look at the non-operating expense. The non-operating expense in note 3, if you're reading the notes in note 3, you've really got a decrease of non-operating expenses of $2.1 million, and it's made up of 3 things. It's just an increase of capital expenses because of all the Prop S capital that we're spending next year. It's a decrease of $11.7 million in debt because our COPs are paid off and we don't have the huge amount of COP debt, and we're just starting on the front end of our Prop S bond debt. And then we're increasing expenses for food service and student activities because once again, we're there all 174 days. So that's $1.6 million. You net those 3, and that's how the non-operating expenses declined by $2.1 million. Non-operating, once again, is not a real key thing. Typically, non-operating is really different funds where you've collected the money in advance and then you spend later. So in the years that you have deficit, it's just because you collected money beforehand and now you're spending it. That's entirely different than the operating funds. So in the operating side, operating expenses are expected to go up $5.5 million. And that's based on $3.5 million of increased salaries and benefits, and then a host of other types of expenses of electric and gasoline, professional development, SROs, textbooks, contracted transportation. Most of those are affected by the 174-day schedule. Textbooks aren't, that just happens to be the cycle that we're in for that particular year, but most everything else was. So when you look at Note 4, and you look at the salaries, the classified salaries are expected to go up at this point about $900,000 or 5.8%, but that's because there's open positions. We had more open positions this year than normal, and we want to fill those. The individuals get a 2.3% raise on a one-step. But when you look at the whole picture and filling positions, it turns out to be about $900,000. Certified salaries go up almost 1.7%, which is 3.1%. $1.7 million, which is 3.1%. The returning teachers, we don't have salary negotiations completed, so it depends on what we actually end up with finalized negotiations, whether this number goes up or down. But I have to plug something into a budget. So just to plug as a starting point, the returning teachers are at 2.7%. Admin raises are 2.7%, increasing $200,000. Instructional, which includes the returning teachers plus department heads and overload, extended contracts, all of the related things that go into that, that increases $775,000. The subs increase $125,000, largely due to the rate increase that we executed around January of this year. And then supplemental instruction increases $575,000, largely due to PD. All of those factors go into that 3.1%. If you move on to Note 5 and look at the benefits, benefits in total go up about $925,000. $550,000 of that is due to health insurance. It's the first time in 7 years that we've had health insurance increases. $450,000 of this is due to the rate increase. $100,000 is due to, just like I said, if you fill more open positions, you have more people on, using the health system, which costs money. The $450,000 represents only half of a year because the insurance plan is on a calendar year. So that rate increase only hits half of the fiscal year. A full year would be a hit of about $900,000. So it's really important to understand that a typical year, as the insurance consultants will tell us, is that rates go up about 8 or 9% per year. And if you do that, you're around $900,000 of annual expense increases that we have been blessed to avoid for 7 years. So that's the insights into the revenue and expense. We come back to the budget overview, and we go down to footnote 2. I'm going to bypass some of these other items for now. Go down to footnote 2, and it talks about the COP fund tax levy of 45.25 cents, and that it's going to be reallocated. So then that's going to put us back to the 4th page. And you go back to the 4th page. This is just a plan to outline how can we gain longevity. So this is the sheet that says COP fund tax levy 45.25 cent reallocation plan. Is everybody on that page? Mm-hmm. Okay. So basically all this is a plan to try to figure out how do we gain longevity out of the 45 cents, which is around $9.9 million, so we don't end up just absorbing that into our budget next year or two, and then boom, it's gone. So the debt service, I got to keep up here with my PowerPoint. Okay. So the debt service fund on this schedule for fiscal year '22 is going to receive 12 cents of that 45 cents, or $2.6 million. And as you follow the schedule down, you'll see that that's consistent all the way through fiscal year '28. The general fund next year would receive a net 4.5 cents, or $1 million. So on the schedule, you see a column that says levy to general fund, a column that says transfer from general fund. Those are just for mechanics. You can ignore those because you add those, you net those two together, and that's how you get the net general fund. That's ultimately what's going to come into the general fund. So $1 million is going to come into the general fund. It's a net of 4.5 cents. If you follow that column down, it is added we add $1 million every year. So you've got 1 million coming in, then 2, then 3, all the way down through fiscal year '28. So this is a way of slowly taking money from that $9.9 million that we get every year and slowly increasing the amount that goes into the general fund. Does everybody get that or have any questions? Because that is very, very key for you to know what this plan is saying. So what's left is the capital side for next year is 28.75 cents, 5.3 million. And that's the sum of the two columns that you see, levy to capital fund and transfer to capital fund. Once again, due to mechanics, the way we have to, reallocate the money, you've got two columns, but it's all capital. You add those two columns, and next year it's about 5.3 million. So then every year, actually I think it might be 6.3 million. So every year it reduces $1 million. So it goes from 6.3 to 5.3 to 4.3, all the way down through fiscal year '28. And when you add all of the capital that gets put away during that time period, you'll see on the schedule that it's a total of $23.1 million. And that capital is to really be targeted to use towards HVAC needs in the upcoming future. There's about $30 million of need identified around fiscal year '28 or fiscal year '26, and this would provide $23 million for that. So the plan basically addresses the continuing viability of ongoing educational operation, plus the upcoming capital expense challenges that face the district. The key is whether we stick with this plan or we modify it slightly, figure out what this plan really is and stick to it every year and resist the temptation to take the short-term easy fix and say, well, we've got a deficit year this year, we're just going to have to pull more money. We can't do that. That's not the way to fix deficits. This is extra money, and I think the community probably expects us to use this prudently. Okay, so now let's go back to the budget overview. And now we go to footnote 4. And this talks about the non-operating. So when you go to the budget overview at the very top, we talked about the operating fund gain and loss. Now let's talk about the non-operating fund gain and loss. So basically for fiscal year '21, we show a $33.7 million gain. Once again, that's because of the Prop S funds. We've got about $38.4 million that we estimate to receive for bond proceeds. And one of the questions on that really is, if we pass the $35 million bond, how do we get $38.4 million? Well, it's a premium. So the premium is not the amount we pay off. It's with market conditions and interest rates. The bottom line is we estimate we'll end up with $38.4 million, but our true debt is $35 million, just like the ballot said, and that's what we have to pay off. We have to pay off $35 million. It's just that we get the premium of receiving $38 million. So that $38 million gets coded to revenue. So for fiscal year '21, we have $38.4 million of revenue for Prop S. We have a net planned $2.9 million deficit in the COP fund due to the final payoff. And then we have food service that incurred a $1.4 million loss due to the COVID impact. So that's the majority of the items that make up that $33.7 million gain. It's mainly due to the Prop S money. And then when you look in the fiscal year '22 number, it says $2,158,000 loss. And once again, that is due to Prop S projects. We've received $38 million on June 3rd this year in fiscal year '21. So for the next several years, you're going to see much larger losses than this because we're just getting going with Prop S in '22. But you could see $10, $15 million losses depending on how much we spend, because once again, we have $38 million in the bank, and now in the future years, no more money is coming in, but we're spending that. So we're going to be on the loss side, but that's okay. All you're doing is spending money that you've already received. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so going to footnote 5, just a quick note that since we are paying off the COP debt, the final COP debt this year, whatever residual balance is that's left in the COP fund will be coming to you to authorize the final transfer in June. And basically, whatever that residual balance is, that money gets swept over to the capital fund, and that's just compliance. That's what we're required to do. Footnote number 6, the Prop S $35 million bond is going to be paid with a 12-cent tax levy, which was as stated on the ballot. That will be offset by reducing 12-cent levy that we would send to our capital fund. So that offset turns it into a no tax increase. Footnote number 7 talks about the food service fund and having a $1.4 million loss for the year, and we would end in a negative balance if we don't do something. So the plan is really to utilize the ESSER II funds, which we believe will become available later on in May, this coming month, and transfer of the we have $4.1 million of ESSER II funds. We would take $1 million of that and transfer that money into the food service fund to reimburse them for the COVID-related losses. That would be part of the use of ESSER II funds. Footnote number 8 more directly talks about ESSER II and ESSER III. ESSER II, we know, is about $4.1 million. ESSER III, we have rough estimates that it could be around $9.2 million. ESSER II is to be spent by September 30th, 2022, but there's a 1-year extension on that deadline, and then ESSER III to be spent by September 30th, 2023, with a 1-year extension on that deadline. Overall, on ESSER III, 20% of those funds are to be spent on learning loss mitigation, but the remaining money of those two funds would probably fall into things like virtual classrooms, the food service reimbursement that we talked about, HVAC, and maybe some of the other projects that were targeted for Prop S that maybe couldn't fit under Prop S. And then the final note, number 9, is really just talking about capital funds. When we talk about our capital 5-year plan, and I don't have that in the budget package today, but that'll be coming. When we talk about capital funds, always in the past, if you remember, for the 5-year plan, we would show a Prop R bucket, we would show a Prop A column, and we'd show just the regular levy column. Now, we're going to have a Prop S column, and then we'll also have the COP reallocation column. So that plan that ran through fiscal year '28 that accumulates $23.1 million, all of that would go in the COP reallocation bucket to be used for HVAC. This way, we've got 5 buckets, and you can clearly see what projects are being funded by what sources. So I think with that, really just to cap up everything, I think the $1.5 million loss that's preliminarily budgeted is something that you'll have to decide if that in the ballpark of what your comfort level is. Are you comfortable with more debt, or more deficit or less deficit? What's your comfort level? And really sort of what is the overall outlook? It's a little alarming that we have a $1.5 million deficit in light of the revenue spikes from local tax and from formula that I spoke of earlier with the summer school ADA and the non-repeating local tax revenue. We have VIC that continues to decline. I think it's around $1 million now for next year. So it can't continue to decline too much more, too many years, but that's continuing to decline, as we already knew. It's not a surprise, it's planned, but still, that's what your budget is having to absorb each year. We talked about health insurance, the fact that we will, in the future years, possibly have $900,000 hits. There's little things like gasoline. We had a favorable variance this year of $158,000 because we budgeted $3 per gallon. We're going to budget at $3 per gallon for fiscal year '22. But as you know, prices are going to be higher in fiscal year '22 than they are this year. So we're not going to have that $158,000 favorable variance. And then just the 174-day classroom schedule will drive up expenses. So I think it's important to just understand that the ability to drive up cash reserves and stay out of deficits, was a little easier over these last few years. And we need to understand we have a lot of bright spots, we've had a lot of successes, but we also need to be realistic in what the future could look like in the near future for some of these revenues. That's really all I've got tonight. There's a lot of moving parts in here. I think it's very important for you to really study the notes on the cash flow budget overview page and the revenue page and the expense page. Really just dive into those notes and study them a lot. That's really all I've got.
If I missed this, I apologize, but what is ESSER an acronym for?
Oh my goodness, I did know that and I have it written down, and I'm sure Dr. Gaines.
Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund.
Very good. I do have that written down, but not memorized, obviously.
I looked it up.
Thank you.
Do you have anything, Jeff? You almost looked like you were.
I just want to thank you for making something very murky, somewhat easy to understand. And going through this level of detail makes it easy to understand where the cash flow is coming in, where the expenses are going out. And I think without that level of detail, we would be trying to find a lot harder to go through and understand what's going on. So I want to thank you for that.
That's the important thing. It's very, very important for you guys to have a really good understanding.
And the food service fund, is that likely to change next year when we get back to some semblance of more normal with 5 days on campus?
I think it will. I think we'll come we were making small operating or small net gains in that fund routinely. Katie does a wonderful job. Dr. Gaines, I don't know if you have a different take on that.
We should see a return to profitability when we are able to sell a la carte.
Right, because I know that's obviously a big money maker for the food service fund. And have we also been seeing some efficiencies with gasoline costs, gasoline going down a bit as we're going through modernizing the bus fleet? I mean, has it been dropping a little bit in usage, but obviously it's offset by pricing going up?
Yeah, that's one thing I honestly don't monitor is the actual gas mileage, but we do, what I monitor is the gallons used, which is about 170,000 gallons, and then the average cost per gallon that we pay. But I don't have a good handle on
And also, has
the,
there been a decrease in maintenance costs as we've been trying to modernize that?
yeah, there should be a definite decrease in maintenance costs.
Okay.
And that's one of the advantages of sticking to that 16-year life cycle schedule. We've got replacement schedules that really is in the replacement schedules are in your budget package. And that's one thing that we really made a lot of progress on about 5 years or so ago of really sticking to buying 5 or 6 buses every year.
Okay, that's all I've got. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thanks a lot for breaking probably the most complicated budget I've seen us have down into bite-sized chunks there. Appreciate it. Okay, next up, establishing 2021-2022 Board of Education meeting dates. I feel like every year I'm the only person who has an issue.
Not as organized as you, so it would be, if something comes up, it's likely to be 6 to 8 weeks ahead of time, so I just gotta roll with it.
I'm 6 months ahead of time, but that
I
November one.
I can't do 6 months. I don't even buy my bananas very ripe anymore.
We've got the one on,
I do have a question, though, concerning this schedule for dates. And it may be something that we need to take up at another time, but it's the board listening sessions and how poorly they've been attended over the past years, too. And if we, if we want to, maybe reorganize that or something to twice a year, or, I don't know. I just felt like there was times when it was just us and 1 or 2 of our regulars,
You should,
Well, we didn't have them last year, and the year before that, they were more orchestrated, and they were well attended 2 years ago.
That was when we had issues or something. I mean, of course, then they're going to be well
They
attended.
were more orchestrated on purpose so that people would attend.
Those were great,
And
yeah.
So I guess.
I mean, if that's what we're going to continue to do, then I suppose that would, work out well. So.
That's what we're planning to do.
Well, I would suggest we schedule them, and then we'll determine if we need all 4.
Right,
And what the
yeah.
content and purpose would be. But I think the issue is to get them on the calendar, so we've got, some continuity on dates.
The only date on that I have concern with, I think history would dictate December 14th, people are in Christmas panic 9 days before Christmas. So we might consider moving that up, but, you know how it's a mom thing. Everybody-
Yeah.
I have to go shopping, I have to do this.
with the board listening sessions, I think that if you were to mention them to high school students too, I think high schoolers would go if they had anything interesting to say, because a lot of times students will joke around like, hey, I have, I mentioned this at the board meeting, mentioned this, and it's like, that might be a good opportunity for, those students to maybe come and mention something themselves too. So if you mention that at the high school level, I think you'd get a few more people to come.
Yeah,
too.
that's
it's a
good.
great idea. We would love to have that happen.
Yeah, I agree with you, Peggy, on that December one. That's pretty close to Christmas, but if we could have it like the first week of December, that might be
Move it up a
better.
week into the 7th.
Yeah, can we do that? Or is that too close to the November 18th meeting? No, I guess not.
I mean, if you move it up 2 weeks, you're going to be right on the tail end of Thanksgiving, so it'd be better to move it up a week to the 7th or sometime in that week.
I don't know,
I personally, I was just thinking about attendance.
okay. Yeah, I actually am fine with the 14th too, I guess.
I don't either. It's just an idea that it's
Okay.
a little close to Christmas.
Okay, back to November 18th though. I really do have a problem with that one.
Your excuse. Ken.
Every year that Thursday. Is it possible to do like 17th, 16th, or the prior Thursday is the 11th?
That's Veterans Day.
Yeah,
Don't do the 11th then? 17th, 16th?
17th?
16th.
I don't care. Pick a day.
16th, Dr. Gaines, would that work for you?
November 16th?
I can make it work.
Okay. Everyone else good with that?
I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Yeah, so kind of like going when our listening sessions would be. Okay.
So,
Do we have to make a motion on this one?
well, with the modifications, what I'd like to do is bring a clean calendar back next time, and we'll just do it under consent. What we need clarity on is the July meeting.
If we should have the July meeting?
You want to have a July meeting?
You know, I was wondering about that meeting, and like Dr. Gaines said, like, there was a year that we just didn't have anything. Like, would that be a good time for us to schedule, since we've been talking about just a board work session?
You just read my
To do
mind.
that in lieu of a meeting?
Yeah, you just read my
Because
mind.
we want to knock that out anyway. I
Right.
just wanted to throw that out there. Oh,
Well,
well,
we
then
could schedule it-
that doesn't work, so maybe we look at a different date.
Week
but
before,
the-
week after?
Right.
But we cancel, like, we don't have the July meeting. Yeah,
We could do it at any time.
but then we try to look at something July-ish or summer-ish for a work session that kind of, yeah. Does it work for everybody? Yeah, I mean, we could try, I don't know. Or do you want to email out?
Why don't we, I'll try to set up some options and we can like do a vote or something and kind of see how it goes rather than trying to.
So no, everyone's agreeing no official board July meeting?
Right.
But we will have a work session at some point, okay.
Sounds good. That's perfect.
So we'll have a clean copy in May with no July date and changing November 18th to November 16th.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there any discussion for putting in a retreat date or a self-evaluation day in there in the
Oh,
calendar?
that's
somewhere?
what we were actually talking about. That's what we meant with that. About not having the official meeting, but having a board, we could have said board retreat. That's what we were talking about, was having something in there.
Okay.
Okay, anything else on that? I'm always the troublemaker. All right, next up is student protection resolution, and I will let Larry lead.
This is a document that was put together by the Missouri School Boards Association. I think it serves two purposes. One, it kind of gives you an awareness of some of the issues surrounding public schools and some of the other situations that are going on. And if it's a case where this is consistent with our outlook or our advocacy, then we could consider adopting it. The main thing that I think this deals with is the whole issue of public funding being diverted. It has to do with public governance versus volunteer governance from subsets. It has to do with being inclusive and serving all students, not just a select few, and not moving them out based upon conditions and cost. And it has to do with direct accountability. I think part of what started this, if you look at the legislation that's currently on the docket in Jefferson City, there are 13 bills that would provide vouchers or early childhood savings accounts. There are 6 bills that would authorize charters in counties of over 30,000 students and people. There are bills to equip virtual education, some of them regulated, some not. And there are also tax credits being offered for virtual education, charter, and private. So the scope of this is really to, I think, lay out what the expectations are for meeting the needs of all people in our community, having consistent accountability directly to the school. And I'll use an example with charters. They receive public funds, but they do not have a publicly elected board that manages that money. And when they're held accountable, it's their sponsor that's held accountable, not the school itself. So it's between the sponsor and that school and their contract. So I think that's the reason this was put together. This is consistent too with the type of advocacy I've done over the years. It's the same issues, it's just said a little bit differently. So that's kind of my view of it. Any questions you have or any thoughts? I know when Kevin and I talked about this, we thought it was important to just talk about this to kind of create some awareness and see what you think, as opposed to just walking in and say, raise your hand, sign, go for this and go crazy. I did a little checking, and from what I can tell, I think about 60 districts from the MSBA community have supported this publicly. I know that a lot of them have considered them, but those are the ones that have actually put their names on the line and submitted them. So any questions or comments you've got?
You said you think 60 have signed
That
it?
was the last number I've seen, but a lot of those numbers are kept at each region as opposed to up in Columbia. So I'm going to do some more digging on that. I guess the other comment I will make too is, usually with something like this kind of follows the paradigm of early adopters, people that really jump in on this. There's probably just a few, and 60 would be a few. And the question is, are other people concerned with this from personal experience in their district? Or is it just something they're aware of and it's okay to be aware of it? Okay.
So adopting this resolution does,
Can I take this?
what value does it have?
Oh, what it basically does, it says there's a school district of school board members, of elected officials, who feel strongly on this position.
But how does that
It
differ?
doesn't have any teeth, Tori.
That's what I'm asking.
It doesn't have
Because
any teeth.
in my opinion, I agree with this document and what it has to say, and I value MSBA tremendously, and, them putting this together and have the same concerns that Larry brought up. But knowing that it doesn't have any teeth, I look at what your advocacy committee is doing in following things and being a face, and I think about the faces that we have and the efforts that would, to me, make more sense, like to have conversations and face-to-face where it's, hi, I'm Jean Preto, and this is my face, and this is what I think, and not a piece of paper that was a signed resolution by a Board of Education.
Well, a resolution just puts us side by side with other districts that are like-minded.
But,
And there's unity, there's strength in numbers.
It's a statement, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Making a statement.
Right.
This is, we support this.
but how does this affect, how does a statement affect, if we're not having that conversations and the face-to-face interactions with those who are, we don't make the laws, but we certainly need to look at things that are affecting our students in
Right.
our district and
I
students
think that
outside of that.
if enough districts agreed to this resolution, that it would certainly raise the eyebrows of some lawmakers. And that's the goal.
I think, I look at this as kind of a tool. Say you go to Jefferson City and you want to sit down with one of our representatives who represents 4 or 5 school districts. Now, 4 or 5 districts walk in with this and say, we don't have a common feeling that these things should be straightened out and we don't like the direction you're taking. It
Is that a shocker, though,
Pardon?
those who are trying to make the laws that know that know that we feel this way? I feel like it's like we're trying to acknowledge something that we think they don't know.
No, that's not it at all.
Okay.
What you're saying
I'm not
is,
following
we
you.
know what your position is. We're opposed to your position, and here's why. That's what this is. That's what advocacy is to present your position.
Sure.
And be able to
I
say,
understand that.
here's how it benefits us, here's how it hurts us. It's a conversation, it's not a demand.
But it's also showing that
Yes, it would.
And so if majority votes yes, then we would sign it?
That's my understanding of it.
Some no votes, just out of curiosity. We got that first.
Because when the board votes, I don't believe we sign it individually. I believe it's signed by the president and by the secretary, if I remember correctly. And that's no different than any other contract or anything else we go into based on a majority vote.
Yeah, I think
So,
part of
I
what
guess
Peggy's
the-
asking though is if we didn't have everybody on board, would we still want to go forward with it? Or would we take the approach of if we don't have everybody on board, let's still pursue the things that Tori is talking about that you guys are doing, which is
And that's
great,
why I
awesome
present
work.
this information,
But
because
maybe
we're-
refrain from this one thing.
Tori, we're gonna do that anyway. We have plans already
Oh, yes, right.
to reach out, you know, to the community.
Like, I just feel like, yeah, the conversations have to continue so that
Oh, absolutely.
everyone feels valued
Involved.
and involved
involved,
in,
right.
in what, yeah, the,
Exactly. This does not override that at all. But basically says that there are some injustices that we are making them aware that we don't like.
What injustices is
Okay,
this
so
addressing?
that was going to be the next question. Has everybody read this
yes,
resolution?
yes. And
Okay.
is it a resolution that we would consider modifying at all? Or this is, you know, we want to use MSBA's language?
we have I would believe we have the latitude to make any change to it.
What would you change, just out of curiosity?
There are some parts that I feel that we're making a statement that is, I feel like clearly covered in our Missouri Constitution, our United States Constitution, when it comes down to equal, I mean, I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but I read it well enough.
Right, Tori. Hey, Tori.
No, I can read it here.
Oh, it's up there?
To educate all students regardless of race, color, like, not parts about money and
How about
use of charter
accountability?
schools and how it's taken over, and like, I understand, like,
Right. How
I
about
don't, and I don't
accepting all-
disagree with it, please
How
make
about
me
accepting all
understand.
students?
Sure,
I mean, is that a point that you would find offensive, that they don't have to take all children?
right, no, yes, I understand
Okay.
that, but I'm just, you asked me to point something out, and I was
Yes,
just trying to
yes.
point
I'm
out
very,
that,
very
we're,
curious.
you know,
Yeah.
that, are there other documents that enforce that all
No.
people that already
there are
have that?
The-
Like the Missouri Constitution.
No, there are not.
The point that's being made here is, you know, charter schools and private schools have different rules that they operate under.
Right.
The premise here is if you accept public funds,
I understand, like, that part I
That's why
understand.
that type
I'm
of
just
wording
going
is
back to the document itself and my questions about adopting the resolution.
I think what you're saying is valid, and one of my concerns with this is something we've seen across our nation, frankly, recently, where somebody takes a stand, or a company takes a stand, or an individual takes a stand, and suddenly there's political retribution. Everybody's taking sides, right?
Yeah.
So you are against my side, so I'm going to
Right.
boycott, or then I'm going to change laws that hurt your company, or on and on and on.
Right.
When you get into the fray, when you get into the ring, which this would be getting into the ring,
Right.
are we as a board really wanting to do that and
Right.
everything that comes with it?
Right,
Because that's got to be a conscious choice,
yes.
understanding everything that comes with that.
Right.
And I think that's a very valid point.
Yeah.
That is something to
It
really
is-
think
It
through.
absolutely is,
Yeah,
Tori.
yeah.
We're a non-political board.
And we've done such
and we've
an
got people
excellent job
from-
of-
This is absolutely not, this is apolitical.
Yep.
However.
But we
it
don't,
does
I think we
affect
want to be
the
careful
public's-
about getting into
However,
political.
it does affect the overall
Sure.
institution
Yes.
of public education.
Yes,
I agree.
agree,
That's it.
100%, yes.
Yeah, and I'm not saying actually which way I personally would go on this, but it's a valid point to really think through and understand before jumping into something.
Absolutely.
If possible, could we get a list of the local, so like Rockwood, Parkway, Fox, and Windsor? It would be cool to know who in our area has done it rather than, I mean, if it's at Bunker Hill or someone that's a little bit farther away, like I want to know if our neighboring districts are doing it.
I know that there are multiple schools in Region 7. I don't know which ones. I'll find out.
How would we know who signed it?
I can find out.
Okay.
Trust me.
See, I think it's rather benign, but
The other question, I want to make one comment too, that anytime you stand for something, there's somebody that's not going to like it. But whether we do this or not, public school board members have a target on their back anyway, or else why would they want to move our elections to November and put us at the end of the ballot? It's because we're effective advocates. That's why. Whether we endorse a resolution or not, the question is, what do we do with the responsibility we have for the school district, and how do we explain that to people that represent us? Because there's more of us than there is of them. We just have to have a united voice.
I think you're right. I think there needs to be a truth campaign to get put out there, because there's a lot of data looking back. I mean, this isn't the first year that charter schools or scholarships or those things have been done. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of facts, some positive, some negative, a lot neutral, because they don't necessarily always address the true root causes of issues. It's an interesting thing. You're right. You are not wrong with that. And also, as Tori said, it's probably assumed that this is where most of us would stand anyway.
Right.
So what I would suggest, based upon what I've heard, if you have some ideas on what we could, if there's a local modification that represents the Mehlville School Board, please let me know. That was the reason for just having the conversation this evening. And let me see what I hear.
yeah.
And we'll
No,
bring
I
it,
That's a
appreciate the
great idea.
conversation.
We'll
I
bring
was
it back next
interested to
month for
hear the
consideration.
feedback from what,
Digest it, see what you wanted, what
you
you
know.
would be interested in eliminating or adding or whatever. And then let's,
no nuclear options though. You can't put that in.
we can't blow it out. And then return to it next time.
Yep. Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
So should I make a motion to table it for now, or?
Oh, we were
No,
not
we
going
were
to
gonna
vote
take it.
anyway.
This was just
This
a
was just
discussion
discussion.
item this
Okay.
evening.
Yeah, that was the
For
intent
this
for tonight.
reason.
yeah,
Okay,
and I
thanks.
appreciate having, the discussion, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is the Prop S update.
Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.
So, yeah, kind of getting out of the gate, things are starting to happen, so we wanted to give you an update, and we'll continue to give these throughout. But it's just project time. So we have split all of the lists that came out of the Facility Steering Committee, became Prop S, and voters approved, kind of into these large bid packages that will be going through the architects, and have the process that we'll have to deal with all of those. Part of that is, we believe, is going to take an excessive amount of time, has to do with all of the permitting and review that will be done by the county and MSD. For example, the OES parking lot piece, we anticipate that it may be up to 4 months for that to run through that approval process based on what our engineers are telling us. Those documents for OES have been at the county for 4 weeks as of yesterday. So that part's slow.
And we've got all these other smaller projects that are kind of outside the architect, that are things that we're used to dealing with. HVAC, roof, and in some places, the fence. So things that don't have to necessarily be reviewed through the county, things that we're used to doing on an annual basis. So if we look at the bid packages across the way, and we've kind of got a rough timeline for each of those, these first four are kind of coming out of the gate in a somewhat similar timeline. The bids will be a little bit different. Of these, beer bomb and transportation are the two of the more complicated projects. We've already started in earnest with our architects, bringing in principals, teachers, secretaries to talk about the design in some of these cases. Next week, when we meet with the architects, we'll be working on transportation in particular. Probably a couple of these schools that we'll bring in as well. And then bid packages 5 through 8, we'll start that design process a little bit later. And then the last bid package will be Bolin and OMS, and it'll be a while before we really get into that. But it's lots of stuff kind of going on all at once. So the first step in a lot of this has been the survey work through Clayton Engineering. So some of those are done. I actually got some stuff from Oakville High School, I think today we got maybe, that some stuff was wrapping up there. And as I mentioned, the OES parking has been submitted to the county. In addition, we do have some things. Last month, or last meeting, the board approved the bid for the HVAC at Forder. So that really is probably the first piece out of the gate that's getting worked on. That's not going through the architects. And then the baseball, softball fields at both high schools, we expect that those bids will go out next week. And we should have those bids ready to be acted on in June, and probably construction starting about the 1st of July and wrapping up about Halloween. So that means that there will be some disruption for fall softball. As we look across all these projects, we're going to have disruption across kind of everywhere. So try to minimize some of that as much as possible, but it's going to be unavoidable in some instances. We also have developed kind of a sample progress report of where we are at each of the buildings. So as we kind of get into it and can start reporting progress, we'll begin seeing some of these and being able to push these out. And then similarly, as we start doing work and we start paying bills, and the bond sale on, set to close on June 3rd, we'll be able to start to report out a ledger-style finance report at the board meetings and have that on our website. But anticipate that you'll be approving the resolution for the bond sale at the May meeting. And that will close. We'll get those funds and invest those and send those down over time. That's pretty much it about on the Prop S update for this time. We'll continue to provide updates as we move along. Some of those will be maybe perhaps a lot in terms of what these reports look like, but maybe not as much verbally. We'll just have that information out. With that, I'll try to answer any questions that you might have.
Looks like we're good. Thanks. You have the next one too?
I do. All right, so strategic plan update. you know, if we go back, you know, we tend to look back, the 2015 strategic plan was kind of built around these three big concepts of student preparation, teacher support, and being effective and efficient. And we kind of broke that student preparation piece into student engagement, continuous improvement, and innovation. And as you've seen before, and lots of times, we've got this, I use this spreadsheet to kind of help visualize where we are across multiple dimensions. And at the top of that is kind of our strategic planning process and cycle. And so last year, in the fall of 2019, we started engagement around the development of the next iteration of the strategic plan that we would be launching next school year. And through that engagement, we established themes that we heard from the community, and then we've been trying to work to bring that into goals and action steps. And that was work that we were doing all year, and we were doing good with engagement. Right before COVID hit, we had come out with the themes that we had heard from the community, and then COVID has kind of thrown this process, the second half of the process, a little bit for a loop. So as we've talked about before, we've kind of had to recalculate a lot of that in terms of what that looks like in the process and our timeline. But where we had come to and where we had reported to you before, the last time we talked about this, was still keeping those three big themes, but adding the theme of safety, which is what we had heard. And then under student preparation, still talking about student engagement and how we approach that through strategies and continuous classroom improvement work and the pathway pieces that we've developed, but also this personalization piece that we heard during engagement with our families. And we've kind of broken that into the learner profile piece, which kind of involves this, how do we develop those? How do we warehouse those so they move with a student? And how do we utilize those? And then how do we continue to expand the pathways that are available to our students? On the teacher support side, what we had talked about was professional development, compensation, a sense of belonging. Our work around being an effective and efficient system is really based in that Aldridge framework and the criteria for performance excellence. And then the safety piece kind of broken into two pieces. One, the physical space, the facilities, and two, the human element side of a sense of belonging and mental wellness. So we've been taking all of that stuff and trying to work towards a final document. We got partial of a draft complete. Since all of the ESSER funds, we're trying to determine the interplay of those funds and then really formatting for publication. So our draft format, our working format, this is a sample of kind of what that has looked like and kind of how we've put that together. And as we mentioned before, as we pull all this together, we look way ahead, and as Marshall had talked about, this $30 million in HVAC that needs to be replaced between 2026 and 2031. So how do we plan for that? Marshall's talked about that and kind of running a similar plan to the way we did this 3 cents a few years ago from capital to operations. So as we take that and put it into these dimensions, so this is from 2016, 17 up to the current year, and where we are and what we've done in these dimensions of the strategic planning process. You know, our curriculum revision schedule, which continuously gets tweaked in terms of when we're going to do something, when it makes sense to buy materials, what kind of staff development, big picture staff development things are we doing? What are the innovative things that we're considering? What's our overarching finance plan, and what are the things that we need to be thinking about? When's reassessment happening? What may be happening with our levy? When's Prop A expiring? All of those kind of things. And then the capital piece and where all of those kind of lay in. Now we have more dimensions because we're layering in Prop S. So what we've done in the past really is lay out a plan, execute the plan as best we could, but adjust as necessary and what conditions had impact us. So as we think about those plans, this process is somewhat cyclical, and as I mentioned, the curriculum schedule kind of gets tweaked a little bit from now and then. Looking forward, what we see in the near future is this continued work around CCI as our elementary cohorts move along that continuum. We are moving a lot of our curriculum work over to Canvas platform, so that's requiring a lot of effort and training. And then within that personalization piece, next year we'll start on that profile work. And for the profile standpoint, the learner profile, we're going to be working that on students, but we also want to do it for adults. And what are the strengths? What are the interests, and how can we leverage the strengths and interests of our employees and to make sure that we've got them in the best places. Innovation-wise, we've got some pieces as we move forward. Next year, my path will go down to sophomores, and then the year after to freshmen. Mehlville at Home will continue to evolve as demand drives what that looks like. We'll be having middle school academy in the 8th grade next year as that cohort of students moves up. So next year we'll have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade all in that academy model. And then for the year after, the high schools being ready for those groups of students coming in. We're also under that pathways trying to lay out that process by which buildings could create a school within a school or become a theme school, whether that be, you know, something around outdoor education or something more along the lines of fine arts or something STEM or international baccalaureate, you know, those kinds of themes. What is the process that we're going to use to do that? What is the process that we're going to use to select which ones that will actually fund and allow to move forward? And then I'd mentioned the last time we talked about it was how do we, you know, try to be a part of that League of Innovative Schools to look at that next group of schools and districts that we can learn from to help move us forward. In the meantime, we'll continue to grow the Early College Academy, or the Early College program as well. When we look at safety, you know, we've got the facility side, which is largely through Prop S. We're also, though, not through Prop S, but because Prop S allows us to do some things and frees up some other dollars to do some things. We've got a plan for security cameras to go into, we'll start with the middle schools and then into the elementaries to outfit all of them with security cameras. And then questions around, you know, adding these SEL positions as we move into the future and really training around belonging and mental health and what that can look like moving forward. On the finance side, these are just big picture pieces, right? So we've got that 45 cents it's moving over, so 12 cents going into Prop S or debt service fund. So how we split that other 33 cents and how that levy gets allocated over time, you know, Marshall kind of laid that out. And then what are the pieces that we're looking at moving forward, right? You know, we've got to start getting ready for these challenges of the HVAC that are coming in. When is reassessment going to happen? The desire to continue to add funds to those salaries that are the least competitive. And when Prop A will expire out there in the future, and then what are the possibilities that could happen as that comes forth. And then all of this capital work that we've got planned based on these different funding sources and kind of where all of that goes. So we've got lots of things here. You can see the cameras on the schedules, what roofs we're doing, you know, the 5 buses, sometimes that ends up being 6 buses. As we look at Prop S, you know, kind of what's happening there and what's going to happen in each school year. So really, as we think about the remainder of this school year in Prop S, it's really just starting the design process. And then when school's out, we'll be starting on that Forder HVAC piece. And then a lot more happening then in the summer of 22 and throughout the year, the summer of 23. And we should have everything wrapped up, hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, by the start of school in 2024 from the Prop S work. So all of that gets put into this big piece, right, that just kind of helps us to see and plan. As we think about those kind of big elements, we've kind of made some tweaks since the last time we talked. And we've changed that teacher support piece to employee support piece. And thinking about all of our 1,400 employees and how we support all of our employees. We're also going to be adding a piece around access and opportunity. And then that will actually delay the final document. A week ago, I thought we'd have it wrapped up by May 20th, but with adding this piece of access and opportunity, it's going to take us a little bit longer to build that piece out. So won't be seeing a final document in 3 weeks now. So with that, I will try to answer any questions that you might have. So if you look at the choice programming that we have in particular, the question that we have is, do all students have access to that? And that even goes to a conversation that we had years ago around the notion of between 5th grade and 6th grade. In that move, some students go into 6th grade advanced math, which puts them on a path to have algebra in 8th grade. Other students are not, they're on a different path. And when we looked at MAP scores, and we would look at 8th grade math, and we would see this high percentage of students, you know, our kids who were taking Algebra 1 will do really, really well on the 8th grade assessment piece when they had to take both. And then when we peeled that out and we're looking at just those students in kind of regular 6th grade math, 6th grade math, and they would score on advanced, the question is, they were in the wrong class. We had them in the wrong class. They should have been in this other class. So was there something that we were doing in that transition from 5th to 6th grade to reduce the access to 6th grade advanced math? So that's something that we've already played with. So we need to be doing the same to some of our other choice programs. And we've done a similar kind of analysis around AP and dual credit courses as well. And are there practices that we have that we're restricting access to students who may be able to excel in some of those areas, but, you know, maybe they weren't performing great, and we were selecting them out based on factors that we didn't need to. So how can we increase access to all of these pieces, these opportunities that we're doing?
Any questions? Thanks a lot for going into that detailed analysis. Appreciate it. Good work on that. All right, now we are up to the place we normally would do first, action items by consent. If nobody has something that they want to pull out, could somebody make a motion?
I'll move, so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. All right, communications. Now we have standing committee reports. Made that mistake early on. It's probably better to do it now because then I don't accidentally step on Marshall's budget, because we did have a finance committee meeting where we went into details on the bonds and how they work, the premium, all of that. It was actually quite interesting if you're an investment geek person, like some of us are. There are materials on that if anybody's interested and wants to kind of dive into it.
And I've already thanked Marshall because I missed the meeting, but the explanation that he sent out, after I read it 3 times, it was perfectly clear.
Yeah, he does, you do a good job
Yes.
of helping us.
Anyone have any others? Do you guys want to, you're good? Okay.
We had an advocacy meeting this evening. The plan moving forward is, in June, we're going to sit down and do a kind of a postmortem to see what the legislature did to us, or opportunities the legislature gave us this year. And our plan is probably in August to be able to sit down with our representatives and just kind of start building a relationship of what was done last year and what we'd like to see in the next year. In September, we hope to have a draft of what we think legislative priorities are for the Mehlville School District, at least from the school board's perspective. And in October to be able to present that to you. The other thing we've talked about is we want to try and sit down with, start talking with as many groups as we can, whether it's PTOs, other groups, and talk about what our experiences are with advocacy, get their ideas, and kind of start doing some education and reach out and find out how we can best represent them and see if they want to be a part of it and see what we can do to help them. So that's where we stand right now. Jeff, Gene, anything else you'd add?
Not at this time.
Just sit down and see what happens in the next 2.5 to 3 weeks when the dust settles.
Okay.
Hopefully, I would just like to add this, that hopefully by us staying on the pulse of what's happening in Jefferson City, that we can avoid any surprises to our school district that could harm us down the road. At least make the people of our district aware of what could potentially affect our district, and maybe, give them the inspiration to call the people that represent them to let them know how they feel about it.
Can you guys give me any more information or understanding in regards to an email that we got about the St. Louis School Board PLC collaboration? I see a lot of Kirkwood, Parkway, Clayton, that are a part of this, and I know they're having a virtual meeting on May 13th. What do you know about that?
I've been in it since pretty much the beginning. That's one of the places where we've started some advocacy efforts. It's
Okay.
also the group that's trying to work for early childhood as its own district.
Okay,
There's 5 of us from that group that have started that too. It's worth listening into.
okay, that's great. I was wondering how that meshed with some of the things, because I know it mentions influencing future legislation, et cetera, and I was wondering how that meshed with some of the
It's
things that
interesting.
our guys are doing.
Somebody had made, I think it was Kevin made the comment about what are other districts doing in terms of like this kind of proposal?
Right.
Well, if you sit in on this sessions, you hear some real interesting comments.
Yeah,
You find people that have already thought of stuff you haven't. You'll find a lot of them haven't even thought about where we are.
okay,
So it's a good educational experience just to understand where everybody else stands.
okay. Great.
Any other committee meetings happen? Okay. We're up to the open period for patron comments on non-agenda items. Julie Droney, hope I'm saying that right, is first up. There is a clock, I think it's right over there, that should be on a 3-minute timer. So you have 3 minutes, and if you hear the buzzer and are not finished, please try to finish up on your last thought and conclude as quickly as you can. And discussion of individuals or specific situations is not allowed. The board has to enforce these rules. The speakers will be interrupted if they discuss matters that violate board rules and policy. So with that, one last thing I'll say is this is your chance to speak to us. We don't talk back, but we will be listening.
Right. No, that's on. Okay, I will try to be brief anyway. I'm aware that there's a House bill being discussed that would ban critical race theory and the 1619 Project from Missouri schools. As a parent, I'm expressing again that we do not want critical race theory or the 1619 Project incorporated into the curriculum. We believe that schools' curriculum should remain politically neutral and focus on academics. There are concerns about the divisive content and motivations regarding these theories. Recent situations have created a strong need for transparency of what is being taught in classrooms. Parents want to feel they are being heard and represented and can trust the content of the curriculum. I hope we are able to respectfully discuss these issues because they are important. There is a fear and a hesitancy to speak about this. There is a risk. When I speak to others, they are afraid to speak up because they are afraid they will be labeled or misunderstood or have some negative consequence. I realize that I too am taking this risk. And I hope it isn't held against me because my concern is for all children to feel that school is a positive, safe place to learn and grow. I honor the work that teachers do, and I know teachers have a challenging job, as is. And we believe that making the classroom more politically and racially divisive will not promote a classroom environment conducive to learning, but will only make educators' job more difficult.
Thank you. Second person is Krista Haley. And the same thing, so I won't repeat it.
I'm speaking for a group. I don't think I'll need the 5 minutes, but can I have the extra minutes just in case?
Could you tell us which group?
It's a group right here
Oh,
about
okay.
the masks. Yeah,
Then yes.
thank you. My name is Krista Haley. I have 2 daughters that attend Mehlville District Schools, and I'd like to start by thanking you for all you guys have done for our kids this year. It's been crazy. So we do appreciate you guys. I'm here speaking for a large group of parents, some of who are here, who all agree that enough is enough with the masks being forced on our children. These masks our kids are wearing 7 hours a day, and they need to be made optional. We are not asking for masks to be abolished. We want parents to be able to decide what is best for their own children. We have kids who are coming home with severe headaches, increased cases of hand, foot, and mouth disease, exercise-induced asthma due to masks being worn in PE, rashes on their mouths and nose, mask acne, and are fainting. Our kids with IEPs for speech and English language learners that rely on facial movements and tongue placement are not able to see their teachers' faces and model their behavior due to the child and teacher wearing masks. Several parents have reported that their kids are refusing to participate in sports, summer school, or other enrichment opportunities to avoid spending any more time in wearing masks. Kids' anxiety is increasing. Non-neurotypical kids who are already having trouble reading faces and emotions are being set up for failure as they transition to the years friendships are so important. We know kids are not wearing these masks properly. They're touched, adjusted, played with, chewed on, and sneezed in. Our teachers have enough on their plates as it is. They should not have the extra burden of being the mask police for kids who just want to breathe some fresh air. I've heard from several staff members that kids are complaining about headaches all the time, especially after they've been playing at recess. The rules for masks don't make any sense. Kids are allowed to eat lunch next to each other with no mask on, but then have to mask up when going outside or back to their class. According to the CDC, the survivability rate for children ages 0 to 19 that tested positive for the virus is 99.997%. This rate is even higher when you include the amount of kids who have had the virus and were never tested. With Mehlville at home and the vaccine available to staff members that want it, there should now be 3 options available for every family to decide which avenue is best for their unique situation. 1, utilize Mehlville at home. 2, send their child to school in a mask. Or 3, send their child to school without a mask. Our community has elected each one of you to stand up for our kids, to put their best interests first, to unite with parents and caregivers, and to be our voice of reason. We trust that you will hear our concerns and make masks optional. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay. You want to take over?
Yep. I make a recommendation, motion to enter a closed session meeting for the purpose of reading of minutes of previous meetings and corrections and approval of same or other items under the Missouri Revised Statute 610.021 subsections 1 through 21 and 610.022 subsections 1 through 6. Lease, purchase, or sale of real estate, 610.0212, hiring, firing, disciplining, or promoting particular employees, 610.0213, preparation for negotiations with employee groups, 610.0219, and individually identifiable personnel records, performance ratings, or records pertaining to employees or applicants for employment, 610.02113. Jeff?
Yes?
Jean? Yes. Peggy? Yes. Kevin?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Patrick?
Yes.
Tori? Yes.
Okay, we are adjourned. And for board members, if we can meet back in 10 minutes at 8:25. Thanks.